On October 12, 1999, 6 high school students from Jefferson County High School in rural Kentucky disappeared without a trace during what should have been a routine educational field trip to the Daniel Boone National Forest. The students, Sarah Williams, 16, Michael Thompson, 17, Ashley Rodriguez, 15, David Chen, 16, Emma Johnson, 15, and Tyler Brooks, 17, had departed that crisp autumn morning at 8 a.m. aboard a yellow school bus, accompanied by their biology teacher, Ms. Patricia Coleman, 38, and the experienced bus driver, Frank Martinez, 52, who had been safely transporting students for over 15 years without incident. The field trip had been meticulously planned for weeks as part of the advanced biology curriculum, with official approval from the Kentucky Department of Education and signed permission slips from all parents, designed to provide hands-on experience studying forest ecosystems and biodiversity in the Appalachian wilderness. Where are you reading from? Share your city and country in the comments before continuing this story. The official itinerary included visits to specific geological formations, collection of plant specimens for scientific projects, and environmental education activities in a conservation area that had been used by the school district for years without problems. The planned route was well documented and had been used by other schools throughout the region, following paved roads and officially designated trails approved for educational activities by the National Forest Service. When the bus failed to return at the scheduled 6 p.m. pickup time and radio contact with Ms. Coleman could not be established, school administrators immediately activated emergency protocols that had been specifically developed for such situations. The complete disappearance of 8 people and a large vehicle in broad daylight in a relatively well-traveled region of the National Forest immediately baffled investigators and suggested that something extraordinarily unusual had occurred during what appeared to be a routine educational excursion. 4 years later, in 2003, construction workers expanding a remote Forest Service road would make a discovery that would finally provide answers to the questions that had tormented the families and community, revealing circumstances so disturbing that they would forever change safety protocols for school field trips throughout the United States. The initial investigation, led by Detective Captain James Morrison of the Kentucky State Police, became the largest search operation in the history of the Commonwealth, involving multiple federal agencies, specialized rescue teams, and hundreds of volunteers from local communities who joined the effort to locate the missing students and their chaperones. The search revealed the inherent complexities of investigating a disappearance in mountainous terrain, where radio communication was sporadic, weather conditions could change rapidly, and numerous unmarked logging roads and hiking trails existed that didn't appear on official maps but were known to local residents and forest workers. Investigators conducted exhaustive interviews with all school personnel, including other teachers who had participated in similar field trips, administrative staff who had approved the excursion, and parents who had spoken with their children on the morning of departure. Analysis of the school's communication records showed that the last confirmed contact with Ms. Coleman had occurred at 12:45 p.m., when she had radioed that the group had successfully reached their first designated study site and that all activities were proceeding according to schedule. Weather conditions on the day had been ideal for outdoor activities, with clear skies and moderate temperatures that suggested no environmental factors that could have contributed to problems during the field trip. Search teams utilized helicopters from the Kentucky National Guard to survey the entire region, while ground teams with specialized search dogs systematically examined every trail, ravine, and forested area within a 75-mile radius of the planned route. Authorities also investigated the possibility that the group had deviated from their planned itinerary, either due to Ms. Coleman's decision to show students additional geological features or mechanical problems with the bus that might have forced them to seek assistance in remote areas. As days turned into weeks without significant progress, the investigation expanded its scope to consider more sinister possibilities, including abduction by criminal groups, catastrophic accidents that might have resulted in complete destruction of the vehicle and its occupants, or even the possibility that the group had become victims of organized criminal activity known to operate in the remote areas of the Appalachian region. The search continued for months, becoming a national effort that attracted media attention throughout the country and resulted in donations of specialized search equipment from multiple states. But no physical evidence of the bus or its occupants was discovered during this initial intensive period. The months following the disappearance were characterized by increasingly desperate searches and speculative theories that captured national and international attention, while the families of the missing students organized independent search efforts that frequently took them into dangerous terrain in their determination to find answers. Linda Williams, mother of Sarah, became the unofficial spokesperson for the families, organizing weekly press conferences, coordinating with national media outlets, and constantly pressuring state and federal authorities to expand the scope and intensity of the official search efforts. The families hired private search teams, including mountain rescue specialists, ground-penetrating radar operators, and even psychics who claimed they could locate the victims using supernatural methods, spending their life savings on efforts that rarely produced viable leads but represented their only hope of obtaining information about their children's fate. Media coverage maintained constant focus on the case, with reporters regularly accompanying search teams, interviewing survival experts and rescue specialists, and speculating about the multiple theories that had emerged to explain the seemingly impossible disappearance. Among the most prominent theories were possibilities that the bus had fallen into a sinkhole or underground cavern that had completely swallowed it, that the group had been victims of a massive landslide that had buried all evidence of their presence, or that they had been abducted by a sophisticated criminal organization that had managed to transport the vehicle and its occupants out of the region without detection. More outlandish theories included speculation about extraterrestrial activity, dimensional portals in the mountainous region, and even government conspiracies involving secret military experiments, theories that were amplified by television programs about unsolved mysteries and sensationalist publications. Public pressure eventually forced the state government to assign additional significant resources to the search, including specialized military units, advanced satellite mapping technology, and consultations with international experts in search and rescue, who had worked on similar cases in other countries. The case also attracted attention from paranormal investigators and supernatural enthusiasts, who proposed theories involving unexplained phenomena specific to the Appalachian region, including historical reports of similar disappearances that supposedly had occurred in the same area during previous decades. As the search extended without results, some authorities began suggesting that the missing individuals might never be found, and that the case could eventually be classified as an unsolved mystery, a possibility that the families categorically rejected, and that motivated public protests and additional political pressure. During the first 2 years after the disappearance, the search intensified with participation from international rescue organizations, advanced satellite technology, and specialized teams that had been sent from Canada and the United Kingdom to assist in the location efforts. Search teams utilized aerial laser mapping technology to create detailed topographic maps of the entire region, identifying every ravine, cave, and geological formation that could potentially conceal a vehicle the size of a school bus. Specialized divers inspected every body of water in the region, including mountain lakes, rivers, and even deep quarries that might have been large enough to swallow a bus, but none of these aquatic searches produced evidence of the missing group. Geologists participating in the search identified multiple areas of geological instability where historical landslides had occurred, and specialized teams used seismic equipment to detect possible underground voids that might indicate the presence of a buried vehicle. But these technologically advanced efforts also failed to produce viable clues. The search also expanded internationally when unconfirmed reports emerged of bus sightings in neighboring states and even in Canada, leading to investigations that extended as far as Ontario, where organized criminal groups had supposedly been involved in trafficking stolen vehicles. Forensic psychologists and criminal profilers were consulted to analyze the possibility that the disappearance was the result of a meticulously planned crime. But the complete absence of physical evidence made it impossible to develop accurate profiles of possible perpetrators. The case began attracting attention from paranormal researchers and supernatural enthusiasts, who proposed theories involving inexplicable phenomena specific to the Appalachian Mountain region, including historical reports of similar disappearances that supposedly had occurred in the same area during previous decades. As the search extended without results, some authorities began suggesting that possibly the missing individuals would never be found, and that the case might eventually be classified as an unsolved mystery, a possibility that families categorically rejected, and that motivated public protests and additional political pressure. The families also began receiving dozens of false leads and fraudulent claims from individuals seeking the substantial reward money that had been offered for information about the fate of the missing group, each potential breakthrough requiring expensive investigation only to result in dead ends or deliberate deception. Academic researchers began studying the case as an example of how unexplained tragedies affect communities over extended periods, and the psychological phenomenon of ambiguous loss experienced by families when they cannot confirm whether their loved ones are alive or dead. The third and fourth years after the disappearance marked a transition period where official search efforts began to diminish in intensity, while the families of the victims established permanent organizations dedicated to keeping the search alive and supporting other families facing similar tragedies. Linda Williams founded the National Association of Families of Missing Students, which became a powerful political voice advocating for better safety protocols in school field trips and more advanced tracking systems for student transportation vehicles. The organization also provided psychological counseling services for families affected by similar disappearances, recognizing that the trauma of not knowing a loved one's fate required specialized support that was frequently not available through official channels. During this period, younger siblings and classmates of the missing students began graduating from high school, carrying with them the emotional burden of having lost their friends and the uncertainty about whether they would ever know the truth about what had occurred during the fatal field trip. The school established a permanent memorial program that included scholarships in the names of the missing students, a commemorative garden on campus, and annual remembrance services that kept alive the memory of the victims while awaiting answers about their destiny. Teachers and administrative staff who had been involved in planning the field trip faced continuing public scrutiny, and in some cases legal action from families who blamed them for negligence in supervision and planning of the activity that had resulted in the tragedy. Media reports during this period began examining more critically the school's safety policies and government regulations governing student field trips, revealing significant deficiencies in communication protocols, emergency equipment, and route supervision that might have contributed to the tragedy or complicated rescue efforts. The case also inspired preliminary legislative changes requiring better documentation of field trip routes, improved communication systems for student activities in remote areas, and more rigorous safety training for teachers and drivers responsible for transporting students outside the controlled school environment. Some community members began suggesting it was time to accept that the missing individuals were probably dead, and that search efforts should cease. But this perspective was met with strong resistance from families who maintained hope that eventual evidence would be discovered. International attention from researchers specializing in mysterious mass disappearances began comparing the incident with similar cases in other countries, where large groups of people had vanished without explanation, under seemingly impossible circumstances. The 5th through 8th years after the disappearance were characterized by sporadic searches triggered by occasional reports of possible sightings or new evidence, but also by gradual acceptance among some families that they might never know the exact fate of their children. However, Linda Williams and several other mothers maintained their unwavering determination to continue searching, organizing monthly search expeditions that frequently took them to increasingly remote and dangerous areas of the Appalachian region. During this period, search technology continued advancing, and families were able to access more sophisticated equipment, including drones with high-resolution cameras, more sensitive metal detection devices, and satellite image analysis software that could identify terrain anomalies that might indicate sites of interest. Annual anniversaries of the disappearance became significant community events, with thousands of people participating in vigils, silent marches, and religious services that not only honored the memory of the missing, but also maintained public pressure on authorities to continue seeking answers. Media coverage continued covering the case regularly, especially during anniversaries, but the focus began shifting toward examining the long-term impact of the tragedy on families, the educational community, and student safety policies that had been implemented in response to the incident. Academic researchers began studying the case as an example of how unexplained tragedies affect communities during prolonged periods, and the psychological phenomenon of ambiguous loss experienced by families when they cannot confirm whether their loved ones are alive or dead. Some community members began suggesting it was time to accept that the missing were probably dead and that search efforts should cease, but this perspective was met with strong resistance from families who maintained hope that eventual evidence would be discovered. The case also attracted international attention from researchers specializing in mysterious mass disappearances, who compared the incident with similar cases in other countries where large groups of people had disappeared without explanation under seemingly impossible circumstances. Advanced GPS technology and satellite communication that had been inspired by the case had resulted in development of comprehensive monitoring systems that allowed schools to track exact locations of field trips in real time, with automatic alerts if vehicles deviated from approved routes or if communication was lost for extended periods. The families also began receiving increased support from other families who had experienced similar tragedies, creating a network of mutual aid that provided emotional support and shared resources for continuing search efforts. The 9th year after the disappearance, 2003, began like any other in the long saga of fruitless searches and fading hope. But September 15th would bring the discovery that would change everything and finally provide answers to the questions that had tormented the families for 4 years. Construction workers from Appalachian Road Services were expanding a remote Forest Service road approximately 45 miles northeast of the original field trip route when their excavation equipment encountered unexpected resistance in what should have been ordinary soil. Civil engineer Robert Hayes, who was supervising the construction project, ordered additional investigation when the bulldozers exposed what appeared to be metal fragments and glass buried deeply beneath multiple layers of earth, rock, and vegetation that had grown over years. As they carefully removed more material, workers were astonished to discover the unmistakable shape of a school bus that had been completely buried under approximately 5 meters of debris and natural sediment. Hayes immediately recognized the potential significance of the discovery and halted all construction activity, contacting local authorities who quickly determined that the vehicle corresponded exactly to the specifications of the missing school bus, including its distinctive yellow color and license plate number that had been widely publicized during the original search. News of the discovery spread rapidly through local and national communication networks, reaching the families of the victims who immediately traveled to the site to witness the find they had awaited for 4 years. The area was immediately cordoned off as a potential crime scene, with forensic teams and archaeologists arriving to supervise the careful excavation of the vehicle and recovery of any evidence that might explain how the bus had come to be buried so deeply in a location that was significantly removed from any known route the group might have taken during their planned field trip. The discovery not only promised to provide answers about the fate of the missing students and adults, but also raised immediate questions about how the bus had traveled to such a remote location and what circumstances had led to its burial under tons of geological material. The location was particularly puzzling because it was accessible only by unmarked logging roads that were not indicated on any official maps and would have required intimate knowledge of the forest's layout to navigate successfully. The careful excavation of the buried school bus, supervised by Dr. Elizabeth Carter from the Kentucky Archaeological Survey, revealed a scene that was both heartbreaking and enlightening, finally providing concrete evidence about the fate of the 8 missing individuals. Inside the vehicle, investigators found the skeletal remains of all occupants, including the 6 students, Ms. Coleman, and driver Martinez, positioned in ways that suggested they had been conscious during the events leading to their burial. Personal belongings of the students were remarkably well preserved due to the anaerobic conditions of the deep burial, including school backpacks, notebooks with diary entries dated the day of the field trip, and even disposable cameras containing photographs of the excursion that provided crucial clues about the group's final hours. Forensic analysis of the remains and the bus's position within the sediment suggested that the vehicle had been caught in a massive landslide that had occurred suddenly, completely burying the bus and its occupants under tons of geological material. Ms. Coleman's recovered notebook, found in the vehicle, documented her growing concern during the morning when she realized that driver Martinez had taken an unauthorized alternative route that had led them into unfamiliar and potentially dangerous terrain. The final entries in her notebook indicated that she had attempted to convince the driver to return to the planned route, but that he had insisted on showing the students a spectacular geological formation he knew from personal experience, but that was not included in any official itinerary. Geological surveys of the area revealed that the region was known for its instability, with multiple historical landslides documented, but this information had never been effectively communicated to public transportation operators or educational authorities. Evidence suggested that the landslide had been triggered by a combination of natural erosion, recent heavy rainfall that had saturated the soil, and possibly the vibrations of the heavy bus moving through terrain that had not been designed to support vehicles of that weight and size. Investigators determined that the accident had been essentially instantaneous, with the group having little or no time to evacuate the vehicle before being completely buried alive. The discovery also revealed that the bus had been traveling on an unmarked logging road that led to an area known for its geological instability, suggesting that Martinez had deliberately deviated from the approved route, despite his knowledge of the potential dangers, possibly in an attempt to show the students unique geological features that were not part of the official educational program. The discovery of the school bus and confirmation of the victim's fate triggered a national wave of grief, relief, and determination to ensure that similar tragedies would never again occur in the American educational system. The families, after 4 years of torturous uncertainty, finally had closure and could begin the process of grieving appropriately and honoring the memory of their loved ones through proper funeral services and permanent memorials. The tragedy catalyzed comprehensive educational reforms that established new national standards for school field trips, including mandatory geological surveys of mountainous areas, strict prohibitions against deviations from pre-approved routes without explicit authorization, and required emergency communication equipment for all educational trips to remote locations. The Sarah Williams Student Safety Act, named after one of the victims, established legal requirements for GPS tracking systems in all school vehicles, satellite communication devices for teachers leading field trips, and mandatory participation of certified local guides familiar with environmental hazards when students visited potentially dangerous terrain. The site where the bus was found was designated as a national memorial, with a monument bearing the names of all victims and serving as a permanent reminder of the importance of prioritizing student safety over educational experiences, no matter how valuable those experiences might be for academic development. The families established the Safe Students Foundation using legal settlements from the case, which became a national organization providing safety training and emergency equipment to more than 8,000 rural schools throughout the United States, focusing particularly on institutions that conducted regular educational field trips to mountainous or remote areas where risks could be elevated. The transportation industry also experienced significant reforms, with new requirements for specialized training for drivers, transporting students to rural locations, mandatory vehicle inspections before each trip, and installation of emergency communication systems that could maintain contact with schools and emergency services even in areas with limited cellular coverage. Advances in GPS technology and satellite communication that had been inspired by the case had resulted in development of comprehensive monitoring systems that allowed schools to track exact locations of field trips in real time, with automatic alerts if vehicles deviated from approved routes or if communication was lost for extended periods. The case also prompted significant changes in teacher training requirements, with new mandates that all educators supervising field trips complete certifications in first aid, emergency management, and environmental risk assessment before being authorized to lead student activities outside the controlled school environment. Today, more than 2 decades after Sarah Williams and her 5 classmates began their final educational field trip, their legacy lives in every safety protocol that protects vulnerable students, every GPS device that tracks school vehicles during excursions, and every emergency communication system that ensures teachers and students can obtain help when facing dangerous situations in remote locations. The advanced technologies inspired by their tragedy have evolved into comprehensive safety systems that combine artificial intelligence, real-time environmental monitoring, and automated emergency response protocols that can detect danger and mobilize assistance even when teachers and students are unable to manually communicate their need for help. The American educational system, once vulnerable to the extreme dangers posed by inadequately planned and supervised field trips to remote areas, now operates under some of the world's most advanced student safety protocols. With communication systems, emergency procedures, and specialized training programs that have been developed specifically to prevent students from experiencing the fate that befell Sarah and her companions. The families of the victims, though forever marked by the devastating loss of their children, had found purpose and healing through their tireless work to protect other students, transforming their personal tragedy into a powerful force for positive change that has saved countless lives and honored the memory of those who died while pursuing education and discovery in America's beautiful but dangerous natural environments. The safety protocols developed in response to the case have been adopted by countries worldwide facing similar challenges in protecting students during educational field trips, creating an international network of safeguards that would have been unimaginable when Sarah and her classmates began their final journey toward learning and exploration in the Kentucky mountains. Their photographs, taken during happier days when they smiled brightly while preparing for their field trip, are displayed in the memorial as reminders that they were real people with dreams, hopes, and families who loved them. Not simply statistics of educational tragedy, but individuals whose lives had profound meaning and whose deaths inspired fundamental changes that have benefited countless other students throughout the world. Sarah's story and that of her companions continues to be told in classrooms, teacher training centers, and public education programs that teach new generations about the importance of maintaining safety protocols during educational field trips, recognizing environmental hazards, and maintaining constant vigilance even in the most seemingly safe and beneficial outdoor educational activities. The systems that now protect students during field trips are so advanced that many participants never realize the multiple layers of safety monitoring operating around them, from GPS tracking to environmental sensors that can detect geological instability and automatically alert supervisors to potentially dangerous situations. Each student who returns home safely after an educational field trip carries with them a bit of the legacy of Sarah Williams and her 5 companions, and every successful outdoor educational experience that is completed without casualties fulfills the implicit promise that their sacrifice was not in vain. Their story demonstrates that even the darkest tragedies can be transformed into forces for good when love, determination, and commitment to protecting others combine to create lasting changes that save lives and honor the memory of those who died, while serving their educational goals and protecting society's most vulnerable members.